So when the angel finally says, hey, come on down, we're going to have a great feast for you guys, there are all kinds of bodies down there, and there's millions of birds flying above. Keep in mind, there is nothing else to eat on planet Earth. All the oceans have turned to blood, all the fish are dead, the green grass and the trees have been burned up, so that looks like a pretty good snack if there ever was one. And probably what we have left by this time are a lot of carrion birds, because so much animal life has died. You probably have just the scavengers and buzzards and etc. that are left. And that then led me to this next verse, which I could never put in proper context. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be, for wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Now this fits because Yeshua has just done this amazing battle. He has hacked to pieces and trampled. Literally, he's just stepped on these guys like grapes. There's all this carnage. And now we see this is what the coming of the Son of Man is going to be. Wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. This is why he was warning the disciples, don't be fooled. Look, when I come back, you'll know. Okay? Trust me. You will know when I return. It won't be some secret deal. It won't be the 1914 JWs or any of this stuff. You will know when I come back. I guarantee it. You will know at that point. So now to summarize, we have the Antichrist. He's going to gather the nations together to destroy Israel, specifically Jerusalem. Yeshua is going to rend the veil and come down at this point. The governors of Judah are going to fend off the attackers briefly by this supernatural power that they will be given. Yeshua is going to touch down on the Mount of Olives. It's going to split in two. The remnant, the Jewish remnant, is going to flee through that mountain pass. And Yeshua will fight the attackers. He gets bloodied in the process. He's going to squash them like grapes. All this is happening outside the city. And then afterward, the angel will invite lots of birds to come down and have a snack. And they will come and do that, which happens there at the end. What will follow immediately will be the judgment of the sheep and goats, where he'll separate the nations, the righteous on his right and the wicked on his left, and the wicked will go into the lake of fire. To conclude everything now, we've seen that the heavens passing away is the unveiling, which happens the day that Yeshua returns. And the day of the Lord is the thief in the night event. Arrmegeddon fits better linguistically as Arrmegeddon, or the valley of the judgment of the sheaves or harvest. Yeshua comes back personally and fights for Israel, and we find that the biblical imagery is literal. So that is just a graphic snapshot of what the second coming is going to look like. I describe all that in prose in my new book, The Millennium Chronicles, which comes out next week. And imagine that up on the big screen. Wouldn't that be exciting? So please do keep that in prayer, because it's my hope and prayer that this could be on the big screen so that people can see how cool Yeshua really is. I mean, he's way more amazing than any superhero. So I do have that. I think we have about half an hour. I'm going to press on, and we'll go through the next presentation as far as we have time permitting. So the next one here is called The Final Rebellion. Now, this is a 3-part series, and I'm skipping the middle part, which is the Millennium Heaven on Earth. I have to skip that. I do have the 3 DVD set over here, and then, of course, The Final Rebellion. Now, what we've seen so far is that the heavens and the earth pass away at the second coming. What that tells us, therefore, if the heavens and earth pass away at the second coming, then when will the new heavens and the new earth come about? The traditional position, and we can just go to slide number 6, says the kingdom lasts forever. Just keep going. We'll skip a little bit of that because we just now went through it. God creates new heaven. That'll work. That'll be fine. What we have here, God will recreate the heavens and the earth at the beginning of the millennium. The traditional timing is, in fact, let's go to that next slide there. The traditional timing is that after the sheep and the goats judgment, then you have the millennial new heavens and earth. This is the traditional timing, followed by Satan's final rebellion 1,000 years later. Then you have the great white throne judgment, and then you have the new heavens and the new earth, or they're called the eternal heavens and earth, as it were. So basically, the traditional perspective would be that there are going to be 3 different ages. There's going to be the current age, the millennial, and then the eternal. I used to hold to that for a very long time. And so you have the millennial and the new heavens and earth distinguished there. But what I found is really the more biblical chronology of the end times, and that's looking at all of the verses. And that's the hard part, is you have to go and look at all the verses. And I did. I went and looked at all the verses concerning this, not just the book of Revelation. And we come up with a very different perspective. And it makes a huge difference. So the other perspective, you'll just go on, is you have the sheep and the goats judgment, Matthew 25, followed by the new heavens and earth. That's it. The new heavens and earth. There's no more new heavens and earth yet to come. This is the big event. And what do we hear about in Judaism? We hear about Olam Haba, right? The age to come. They don't talk about Olam Haba and then Olam Haba, right? They just talk about the age to come. That's it. And that is when we're told in many passages that God is going to dwell among His people. The New Jerusalem will descend at the beginning of the millennium. Then 1,000 years later, we have Satan's final rebellion. And then we have the great white throne judgment, where whoever hasn't been judged will finally get their day in court. So just to give you a couple verses from the middle presentation, which I don't have time to get into great depth, but we'll do our best here. Again, the current and traditional perspective is based on Revelation 21:1, which says, "Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away." Keep in mind, what he says is the first heaven and the first earth. So that means that he's now looking at what set? Is it the second, third, fourth, or fifth? This is a multiple choice. Second, right? Because after first comes second. I'm at least that good at math. So that's the good news, is after the first heavens and earth come the second heavens and earth. So John is seeing the second set. He's not seeing the third set, as some people would have us believe. It's the second set. And he's seeing that because this is happening at the beginning of the millennium, because the heavens and earth passed away when Jesus came back. The heavens receded like a scroll. It passed away with a great noise. The earth was, shaken incredibly. It fell, would not get up again. All the oceans turned to blood. All the islands and mountains passed away. That's the earth passing away. And then we compare that with Isaiah 65:17. "Behold, I create new heavens and a new earth." God says through the voice of Isaiah. So these are both one and the same event. When you look at Isaiah 65:17, it says in verse 20 that then a young man will die at 100, and a sinner will die at 100, being cursed will die at 100. So death is still present in the new heavens and the new earth. Delitzsch, commenting on Isaiah 65, he says that Isaiah was confused. This comes from the pulpit commentary. Perhaps the best explanation is that of Delitzsch, that there are to be altogether 3 worlds or 3 ages: the current age, the millennial age for select people, and the heaven or eternity. He says Isaiah and the other Old Testament prophets have an indistinct view in which the second age and the third age are confused together. Really? I don't think God's confused. I don't think God's confused at all. I really don't. I think he might be confused. But God is not confused. Here's Barnes commenting. The passage before us, Isaiah 65:17, the passage before us is highly poetical, and we're not required to understand it literally. Of course, there is, so far as the language is concerned, no more reason for understanding this literally than there is for so understanding the numerous declarations which affirm that the brute creation will undergo a change in their very nature on the introduction of the gospel, Isaiah chapter 11. That's a great classic passage talking about where Jesus is going to rule and reign. The traditional timing is also based on this. Then I saw a great white throne and him who sat on it, from whose face the earth and heaven fled away, and there was no place found for them. So people would say, well, look, chapter 20 comes before chapter 21. Therefore, if the heavens and earth fled away, there in Revelation 20, verse 11, which happens at the end, Revelation 21 must come after that. But what, in reality, that is not the case. And we've talked about Revelation not being written chronologically, but thematically. I wish I had more time to really go into that. I can only tease you with the idea, but I encourage you to go take a look at it. Really, the bottom line is John is looking at, there's these thrones set up for those that judgment was committed to them, and then he sees a big white throne. And like, who is this person on this big white throne? Oh, this guy, the one on the big white throne? That's the one from whose face heaven and earth fled away. Really? Okay, he's not saying it happened right then and there, but he's saying that he's the one. When did the heaven and earth flee away? At the second coming. So he's using that as a description to say, that's the guy who's on the big white throne. That's the one we're talking about. Also, creation is established forever. The sun and the moon and the stars and the universe will not get blown up. They're going to be restored. And it says in Psalm 148, 1 through 6, praise him, all his angels, all his hosts, sun and moon. Praise him, all you stars of light. Praise him, you heavens of heavens. For he commanded they were created. He also established them forever and ever. He made a decree which shall not pass away. These are never going to go away. Jeremiah 31, 35 through 36. Israel's existence is tied to the existence of the heavens and earth. Thus says the Lord, who gives the sun for a light by day, the ordinances of the moon and the stars for a light by night, who disturbs the sea and its waves roar. If those ordinances depart from before me, says the Lord, then the seed of Israel shall also cease from being a nation before me forever. So again, those are never going to pass away, nor will Israel ever pass away. God has big things in store for Israel. The earth was established forever. I'll just skip on. Psalm 104, the earth cannot be moved. The earth is going to endure forever. Ecclesiastes 1:4. In the regeneration, Jesus talked about. Assuredly I say to you that in the regeneration, palingenesia, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his glory, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones. Well, the regeneration is when the 12 disciples are going to sit judging. This is happening during the millennium. It's not happening in the eternal state, as it were. It's happening right there at the beginning of the 1,000 years. And then Titus uses the same word that by his mercy he saved us through the washing of regeneration, renewing of the Holy Spirit. It's palingenesia. It's the same word. See, the planet isn't going to be blown up like the Death Star. That's the best example I can think of. Just as when we get our new body, it's going to be a new you, but the same you. It's going to be a new me, but the same me. If it's just a clone of Doug, I'm not interested, because I'm working to receive the reward. I want to be part of that. Not just my clone gets to enjoy, but I remain in whatever. I want to be there. So it's a new me, but the same me. In some way I don't fully understand. But the earth is going to be completely restored. And the earth is going to be liberated according to Romans chapter 8. It says, for the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of God, for the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who is subjected in hope, because the creation itself will also be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. So the earth, the creation, is waiting to be freed from the bondage of corruption. Not, again, blown to bits. It wants to be freed from that bondage. And it's Dr. Robert Gentry discovered that an alpha particle escaped from things like granite and left the granite in a state of decomposition, so that the dirt, the rocks, are literally in a state of decomposition or in a state of decay, death. And Jesus is going to remove that property. He's going to take it out when he comes back at the second coming. So it will be a transitional period for sure, but that will take us to the new heavens and new earth created at the beginning of the millennium. Now, I'm just going to skip on to the rebellion after the 1,000 years of peace, just for the sake of time. So after this incredible time, in that middle presentation, I talk about how the earth is going to be restored. Everything is going to be beautiful. We talked about DNA having the ability to emit light. So all the grass will emit light. All the trees are going to glow. It'll be a beautiful place. If you saw the movie Avatar, it'll be something similar to that, but far better. Because everything's going to glow. The light of the Lord will shine upon it. It will absorb that light and then re-emit that light with a beautiful glow in it. But after this time, after 1,000 years of just great times, Satan will be released to go out to deceive the nations. It's a very curious kind of passage in Revelation chapter 20. It says, now when the 1,000 years have expired, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. They went up on the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. So the beloved city, I understand as being the New Jerusalem. Because once the new heavens and earth are established at the beginning of the millennium, then the city comes down. And again, in the middle presentation, which I didn't have time to talk about too much, but just to lay a foundation here, God says that He will be in the midst of Israel forever. He's going to put His throne in the midst of Israel forever. He says that He will, in the days of those kings, that's the bad guys, He will establish a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, Daniel 2:44. He says that He will give the kingdom to the saints of the Most High. He's talking about the Jews there. He'll give that to them forever, even forever and ever. So the kingdom that is established at the inception of the millennium will go on forever. It will never pass away. But unfortunately, in some of our dispensational teaching, it's this idea that, well, the Jewish people get 1,000 years, and after that, well, that's just tough. Because then God's going to blow up the planet, and He's going to make a new one right then and there. But no. The planet is blown up, so to speak. It's destroyed. Again, it's not blown up. It's not annihilated. But it's wrecked for all practical purposes at the second coming of Jesus. He then restores it to what it ought to be at the beginning of the millennium. And He establishes His kingdom, which will go on forever and ever and ever. And then we have this final rebellion after 1,000 years. And so it's understanding what happened before that will now unlock this final assault afterward. And we're going to look at some of the remaining clues. The Immortals will have new bodies versus mortals. So the good news is all of us are going to be there as immortals. All right, so don't worry, don't panic. Oh no, do I have to go through this again? No, you don't. That's the good news. We're good to go. The millennial sacrifices are going to be for a protection. And I'll explain that. Death is still possible for mortals, not for us. The river of life, available for mortals for cleansing. The tree of life is available for mortals for transformation and healing. Now, the aspects of the immortal life, those are for those of us who are born again. We will have the bodies like angels. Again, as we saw in Daniel 12:3, those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the firmament, etc. Matthew 13:43, the righteous will shine forth as the sun, as we already saw. I believe that we will be covered with precious stones. We know that Satan was covered with precious stones in Ezekiel 28:13. Every precious stone was your covering, the sardius, topaz, diamond, etc. I believe that we will have precious stones. Because when we look at 1 Corinthians 3, it says, now if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, or straw, each one's work will become clear for the day, that's the day that Jesus comes back, the day will declare it because it will be revealed by fire. And the fire will test each one's work of what sort it is. If anyone's work which he has built on it endures, he will receive reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. You see, when the veil comes down between heaven and earth, and yes, we've got our new bodies, we've got some beautiful gems on us, but I think we might have some wood, hay, and straw as well. When that fire of God hits us, it burns off anything that can't remain. And only the gold, silver, and precious stones will remain. And then we will forever be in this bathing, literally bathing in this plasma, like God plasma kind of stuff. And that'll be like the new kind of air we breathe, essentially. We'll be like, living in the water as a fish, so to speak. But this will be now permeating everything. So as a believer, you gotta have a new body. If you don't have a new body, guess what? It's gonna be hell. Quite literally. It says in Isaiah 30:33, for the breath of the Lord like a stream of brimstone kindles it. The it is talking about Tophet or Gehenna. So You've got to have a new body, imperative. Just a recommended resource, the genetics of the incarnation and the resurrection. Authority will be given to the immortals. The judgment's committed to them. They'll have authority over 10 cities. We'll just kind of flip through that one pretty quickly there. We see in Revelation 20, verse 4, that they're going to live 1,000 years and reign with Christ or with Mashiach for 1,000 years. And then immortals will lead the nations in bringing gifts into the new Jerusalem. So we're on the next slide. Because the abundance of the sea shall be turned to you, the wealth of the Gentiles should come to you. They shall bring gold and incense, and they shall proclaim the praises of the Lord, that men may bring to you the wealth of the Gentiles and their kings in procession. This is Isaiah 60, verse 5. But notice how it's exactly parallel to Revelation 21. The nations of those who are saved shall walk in its light, and the kings of the earth shall bring their glory and honor into it. And they shall bring the glory and the honor of the nations into it. So, you see, John isn't coming up with new ideas. He's repeating what's already been revealed in the book of Revelation. And in Revelation, it's talking about this millennial timing, and so too in the book of Revelation 21. Micah 4, it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord, this is Har Beit Adonai, my Hebrew got transposed there, shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and it shall be lifted up above the hills, and people shall flow to it. We see the same thing in Isaiah 2. We'll go on. Revelation 20, verse 7. We've looked at this. So now we have the context of the final rebellion. So where people come, the camp of the saints is where the Jews will be doing, the mortal Jews will be doing their thing. The temple will be there, etc. The beloved city will be the new Jerusalem. And then aspects of the mortal life. Mortals are the tribulation survivors' children. They will have a grace period of 100 years, according to Isaiah 65, verse 20, to basically be as innocents. Just like you have in Numbers 32, it says that all those who were 20 and above could not enter into the promised land. So if you were 19 and below, you were considered a child. You were not held accountable for that. They will travel to the city for the feast. Those loyal to Jesus travel on the highway of holiness, the King's Highway, I call it. They must put on immortality to enter into the new Jerusalem. The river of life will be for cleansing, and then the leaves of the tree of life will be for transformation. And sacrifices are going to provide a covering or a force field until these people are transformed. Keep in mind, the new Jerusalem is on planet Earth. Yeshua in his flaming fire, God the Father in his flaming fire. You need to have something to protect you if you're mortal. We are there as immortals. According to Isaiah chapter 4, the survivors in Zion, it says, and he who is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem will be called holy, and everyone who has been recorded for life in Jerusalem. When the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and cleansed the bloodstains of Jerusalem from its midst by a spirit of judgment and by a spirit of burning. So there again we see that idea of fire. Once again, the 100-year grace period, God says, in Isaiah 65, behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and there will no longer be in it a young boy who lives but only a few days, or an old person who does not live out his days. For one who dies at 100 years will be thought a mere youth, and one who falls short of 100 years will be considered accursed. So you have at least 100 years, apparently. And then if you go beyond that, if you begin to sin in some way, you will be judged rather quickly. It kind of makes sense. I mean, we don't even get 100 years most times here. And we can't actually see the New Jerusalem. We can't see Jesus or Yeshua if we wanted to actually go. We have to do it by faith in this life. Now, in the age to come, high tech is going to be really low tech in the millennium. All those gadgets that we have today that we think are so cool, you're not going to be impressed. Remember back to this kind of stuff. Electronics Illustrated back in the 50s. Wow, pretty cool, huh? Now we look and we scoff at those things. Oh, that's ridiculous. Or those CRV monitors. What are those things, right? I mean, I don't think my kids even know what one of those things are. Or the electronics that, again, 10 years ago we thought were pretty cool. Remember, 8-track tapes, all that stuff. They were the rage back in the day, but now they're just garbage. You won't need heaters or air conditioners because there won't be any inclement weather. No, it won't be too cold, won't be too hot. You won't need air conditioners. People won't have to go and dig out coal from the mines. You won't need these big, massive trucks to pull all this to the electric company, etc. There won't be any problems to overcome. Communication and energy will not be a problem. There'll be no wars to win, no diseases to cure, no crimes to solve, no factories to manage. The planet healed. Most of the jobs that computers performed will not be needed. And here's something I find quite interesting. How will you communicate in that age? Well, prayers are going to be like emails. In Revelation 5:8, now when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. You're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. You can't store prayers in a bowl, can you? Well, can you store an email in a box? Yes, you can. We do it all the time, right? It's just, there's some kind of technology that we don't understand. It's way advanced from what we get. And so I would call this thought mail, that Immortal will be able to send a message, an instant message, and say, okay, I want to send it to this guy. You send it, and there it goes. It remains to be seen exactly how that's going to look. But it'll be pretty cool. You won't need any light bulbs anymore. Moreover, the light of the moon will be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun will be as sevenfold, and the light of 7 days in the day that the Lord binds up the bruise of his people and heals the stroke of their wound. So the sun and the moon are going to be healed as well. Apparently they're not as bright as they used to be, but they're going to be brighter in that day. 7 times brighter to be exact. People are going to build houses and vineyards. This is Isaiah 65:21 through 22. They're going to plant. No one's going to take their stuff. Amos 9 tells us that when the plowman shall overtake the reaper, the treader of the grapes, him who sows seed, the mountains will drip with sweet wine, and all the hills shall flow with it. As for money, there will be only bartering, if anything, upon any agreed upon exchange of services. It may not even be anything, I don't know. But there won't be much. No commodity, there'll be no commodity which anyone can hold exclusively. So nobody has all the gold, for example, or all the dollars or something. Food will not spoil. It's going to be plentiful, never spoil. Abundance of land and perfect weather. Gold and silver be in great abundance. Occupations, no doctors, surgeons, nurses, no disease, no sickness, no lawyers, no judges. Yeshua is going to be the perfect lawgiver and judge. Well, we do like some lawyers, right? Yes. Okay. There'll be no policemen and no robbers. No bankers. That's probably more of a hallelujah. No assets, no commodities or fiat currencies to manage. We won't need any weather forecasters, no garbage men, no soldiers, etc., etc., etc. There's going to be a highway to the city. A highway shall be there, and a road. It shall be called the highway of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over, but it shall be for others. Whoever walks the road, although a fool, shall not go astray. There will be a highway for the remnant of his people who will be left from Assyria, as it was for Israel in the days that he came up from the land of Egypt. So again, there's going to be this highway system that Yeshua is going to create. Again, we see in Isaiah 19, Isaiah 49, I will make each of my mountains a road, and my highways shall be elevated. Just passing on here. They're going to celebrate the feast, Zechariah 14. Then everyone who survives of all the nations that have come against Jerusalem shall go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Booths. If they don't go up, they don't get any rain. We have in Isaiah chapter 2, people will go up to the mountain house of the Lord, etc. Now, let's move on here. Could the millennial sacrifices be a force field for mortals? This is a question that has stumped a lot of people, stumped me for a very long time. I want you to think of the millennial sacrifices like a force field. Think, what is a force field? We don't believe in force fields, do we? Well, sure we do. We have a force field here on planet Earth. It's called the magnetosphere. If it weren't for the force field or the magnetosphere, we'd all be dead because the solar particles would bombard the planet till it would just become nothing but a dead piece of rock. But thanks to the magnetosphere, it keeps out those harmful rays and the gamma rays, etc. And we're protected. It's kind of like what we see in pop culture. Here's the Fantastic Four. She's got this force field cool thing. I think that because the veil has been removed, those who are mortal are going to need some kind of a force field. Again, we know what God is like. We've seen that. So we'll just skip that one. So we'll skip the next couple of slides because we've already seen some of these things. Let's see. Actually, I'll go. Sorry. Just trying to make good use of my time here. Smoke around God in his temple. That's Revelation 15. The temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one was able to enter the temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. We also see in Revelation 16 that I heard a loud voice from the temple. We have Isaiah chapter 6, where Isaiah goes up into the temple of God in heaven, and there he sees an altar. Of course, God is in that place. You see, there is a temple in the New Jerusalem right now. That's where God is. There's a temple in there. And in Hebrews 9, it tells us that Jesus came as high priest of the good things to come with the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is, not of his creation. Not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood he entered the most holy place once for all. So Jesus took his blood, he went into the temple of God in heaven. There is such a place. That's where God is. And then in Revelation 21, John says, well, I saw the New Jerusalem, and there was no temple in it. So wait a second. There is a temple in it. We clearly see that in other parts of Revelation. But then we get to Revelation 21, and the temple's not there anymore. I would argue that the temple, temple of God in heaven, is that place that Moses was told to make a copy of, and God himself is in there, and the temple is protecting everybody from him. And when Jesus took his blood in there, he now reconciled all things on heaven and earth to make them one, so he can bring down the wall of separation. And when it opens up, according to Revelation 15 and 16, that out of the temple came noises and thunderings and lightnings and earthquake and great hail. That's what's going to happen when that temple of God in heaven opens up. Then here comes God in all of his blazing, fiery glory. But there will still need to be a temple for the mortals because they need some kind of a covering. And let's go to God doesn't like the sacrifices, but sacrifice and offering you did not desire. God doesn't like sacrifice. He's not like, oh great, thanks for bringing me some sacrifice. Psalm 50, will I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? I mean, God's like, what, are you kidding? Isaiah 1, verse 11, I do not delight in the blood of bulls or the lambs or goats. So he doesn't like that stuff. Go to the Millennial temple. But there is going to be a temple in the age to come. And the sacrifice for the people, they shall stand before them to minister to them. So the Jews, at that point, will finally be the priests to the nations. And whatever that temple looks like, we don't know exactly. This is one person's rendition of it. But there will be a temple that's now on planet Earth. And it's going to be for the mortals. They will need it. We'll go to the next slide. The word korban is the word for sacrifice. It's the object which permits one to come near to God. And what is so important to understand is that the korban is what's going to provide the kippur. So in Leviticus 1:2, when any of you brings near or yakriv an offering, a korban. So we kind of miss some of that in the English, but you yakriv a korban. You cause to come near the object which allows you to come near. That's what the sacrifice is all about. Because God wants you to be near. These will be in operation in the millennium. There's tons of verses that describe that. And atonement really is covering. The word atonement, I think we should throw out of our English language because it's completely devoid of any meaning. And what we see is that the word kafar, or kippur, is the word, it means to cover something. It doesn't mean to make atonement, like to get rid of some kind of a moral stain. It means just to cover. That's why you can use that same word to make atonement for the altar. And I guarantee you, the altar never did anything morally wrong. I don't know, it's just a thought. But it never did anything morally wrong. That's why it's a sacrifice, it's a covering so that whatever the object is can be near God. Remember when God came down on Mount Sinai, what was happening to the mountain? It was smoking. It was smoking. I think we're out of time. So I'll just leave you with this. These sacrifices in the millennium are for the mortals that don't have a new body yet, but God is now near them. They need something to protect them. After the 1,000 years are completed, Satan will get them to come up. The clock is ticking. There's 1 year extension, if you will. And as he goes out, he has 1 year to persuade people to turn against God. They come up against the beloved city, the New Jerusalem, and essentially the clock runs out. There's a shelf life for a sacrifice. It's 1 year. Right? That's why the minister goes once a year into the Holy of Holies, it runs out of time, and then it just evaporates like a force field evaporating from the USS Enterprise. And the fire that has been there, this big plasma kind of stuff, just envelops them, and then they burn up. And that will be the end of the story. And so, those are all the things that I'm talking about in the book, which comes out next week. I'm sorry it wasn't here already, but I also talk about the river of life, the tree of life, and how all these things fit together so people can get their new bodies. So thank you very much. I'm sorry we're out of time. I will take questions in just a second. So thank you. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Doug.
Thank you.
We're on a somewhat of a tight time schedule, so we have time for Q&As. I'm going to pass around the mic so we can get this recorded, but we have to stop promptly at 4:30. Okay. So, and on your way out, please. Doug has his materials for sale, and please also, if you can help support him with an offering, that'll be great as well. He's come all the way here from California. He's got a lot of expenses. This is what he does for his full-time support for his family, and so I want to encourage you to help support Doug's ministry. So, questions, Gene?
Yes.
And please ask your question into the mic for the recording's sake.
Okay, I want to say that I enjoyed your presentation very much.
Thank you.
And especially this morning. But I have one big problem. I have a problem getting my hands around the sons of God coming down from heaven and so on. So my question is this. Why would God give male genitalia to angels if he didn't want them to use it? And the purpose of genitalia was that men would multiply, and were angels supposed to multiply? And then my next question is the Nephilim described as mighty men of renown. But in 2 Samuel 28:3, David had mighty men of it says men that one of his men, mighty men, wielded the sword, and 800 were killed in one day. That was a mighty man. I'd say that's a mighty man.
I think so.
And my third question is that the wickedness of man was very great in the face of the earth.
Yes.
That God was sorry he created them. So you didn't mention that at all this morning, hardly. And the responsibility for evil and wickedness is taken away from man and put on angels. And that's my problem.
Okay. Those are three very good questions. So the first one is presuming that they had genitalia. We don't know that they had genitalia. Let me give you a verse, two verses in particular, that will give you something to pause. First of all, it says in 1 John 3:9, it says, "No one having been born again continues to sin, for the seed of God dwells in him." The word for seed is sperm. So, in what way does God have sperm? I mean, does God have genitalia? Well, I doubt it. I don't think there would be any reason for that, as far as I can tell. But are we looking at more of a hardware versus a software issue? That's what I would argue that we're dealing with. It's not the hardware that really matters, because you can pass on seed through a computer nowadays. And I wish I'd had time to show you the video on synthetic biology. But what synthetic biology is now able to do is they can create DNA in the computer. Basically, they're writing the code. They're arranging, A, G, T, and C, or T, C, A, G, and they're arranging these on the computer, and then they hit print. And when it goes from there, it goes to a little device called a DNA printer. It's pretty small, let's say that. But what it does is it literally is forming in 3D. If you've never checked out 3D printers, you should check those out too. Those are cool. But they can literally print this thing out, taking corn that they reduce down to sugar, and then they use the sugar for the nucleic acids, and they can print it one nucleic acid at a time, right? So that's going through the computer. So we're talking about seed. What is DNA? DNA is seed. Seed's DNA, okay? So it's information. Information is the key. And I probably didn't spend enough time on the concept of information, because information is a non-material entity that requires a physical medium. It's a non-material entity that requires a physical medium. So we can pass on information. We do it all the time. Every time you make a phone call, you send an email, you're sending on information. You may or may not decide to print that to make it take some kind of a physical, tangible form. When the male sperm is traveling, we think of the hardware. We think of the flagellum. But when it gets to the egg, it gets rid of the flagellum. It gets through the outer wall, and then it pops its top. And what do you have left? You have the chromosomes. And those chromosomes contain genes, which contain DNA, which contain nucleic acids, but which contain information. You see, it's not the hardware that matters, it's the information that matters. That's what we're really talking about. So how Satan or the angels how they passed it on, whether they had the application device or not, I don't know. I don't know if they had any kind of genitalia. Just think of it as an applicator. I mean, that's all. I don't mean to be graphic, but that's all the thing is. It's a way of getting seed to where it needs to go, and that's what we're talking about here. So you have this information process. It also says in Isaiah 53:10 that Jesus will rejoice to see his day. He will rejoice to see his seed. Well, I don't agree with the goodness, I just forgot their name. Those people, yes. The people that say that, Jesus got married to Mary Magdalene or something like that. I totally, the Gnostics, thank you. I totally reject that. But how does Jesus have seed? I don't think it's the physical way that you and I are thinking about it. It's information that's being passed on. And that takes us back to Genesis 3:15. I will cause enmity between you and the woman, between your seed, speaking to Satan, your seed and her seed. Does a woman have seed? You bet. Sure she does. There's really very little difference between an egg and a sperm. One is a missile and the other is a landing pad. But it's the information that they have, right? Because once the missile gets there, it pops its top. Hey, here's some chromosomes. You want them? Sure, I got some chromosomes too. They come together and the chromosomes start to do their business. That's the only difference. The only difference between them is the XY chromosome. That's the only distinction between a male seed and a female seed. So I hope that answers the question. Does it? It doesn't answer the question? Okay. It doesn't answer any of your questions? Okay.
You did a good job
okay.
on that one.
Okay.
You had some other questions?
Okay.
Okay. You had a three-parter though, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the Nephilim.
Okay. Remind me again. What was specifically?
They were described as mighty men.
Okay, the word Gibor,
and
or Giborim.
In 2 Samuel 28, it talks of mighty men.
Yes. Well, the word there is Giborim. I don't believe that Giborim is used exclusively to mean Nephilim. It just means that they were pretty amazing. Okay? I mean, God himself is described as a Gibor. So it doesn't mean that they're Nephilim. Right? But it does tell us that there were Nephilim on the earth, and these were the mighty men of old. So I understand the mighty men of old to be something akin to the Greek demigods. So something like Hercules and Achilles, etc. These guys are basically these demigods. Now, there's probably the story got bigger and bigger as it went, but that there were hybrids on the earth in those days. So only if you say that the meaning of Gibor is Nephilim, then you have a real problem. But I don't do that. I know some of my friends and colleagues take that position, and I think it's a wrong position to take. And part 3 was?
No, that's all right.
Okay.
Okay, you never brought up Nimrod. Nimrod somehow has taken the technology of the day, the fire bricks,
yes,
and built the Tower of Babel. And I always thought maybe you had some say on that.
Well, Nimrod's an interesting guy, and I only have so much time to speak on different topics, so I left Nimrod out of the book. But Nimrod, the very word means let's rebel. Some people have suggested that he was actually the ancient Gilgamesh. I think that's a real possibility. It could be related to the god Marduk. That's a possibility as well, because Nimrod and Marduk are actually the same root, which means rebel. So there's some questions to who this person was, but if he became, and here's where some of the words, I won't take a hard position on it. My friend Tom Horn will take a harder position if you follow his stuff at all. He says that in that day he began to become a Gibor. All right. Now, again, if Gibor means Nephilim, then Tom's got a great case. But if Gibor doesn't always mean Nephilim, then it's a shaky case. So I take it with a grain of salt. I do think there's something very peculiar about Nimrod. I do think it's very plausible that he began to be something that he wasn't. I think the whole Tower of Babel, Bav-El, is the gate of the gods. And so I think he was not just trying to make a skyscraper, but he was actually trying to get to some kind of a portal. But to the extent that he was a Nephilim, I'd say probably, but I wouldn't say absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Oh, sorry. Okay. We'll go get back. Sorry.
I wanted to ask a quick question about Save the Planet and this whole green and the CFC and all that, and how, the younger generation's really buying into that and how that's going to, I noticed up on one of your slides it said the harmony of the earth, anyone who's not buying into the harmony of the earth.
Yes. Yeah. Barbara Marcinek said that, right.
So how do you see that buying into everything?
Well, I think the message that people are getting, that are channeling messages from demons, are that we are being, very bad stewards of the earth, and that the aliens will have to come back one of these days to help us set things straight. So, with that in mind, I'm all for being a good steward of the earth, but things like Agenda 21 and other things are making it such that it's become quite a religion. It's interesting, if you ever looked at the New World Order playing cards, all this was predicted many years ago. Something just if you got some extra time to go check that out. New World Order playing cards, they'll blow you away. But it's part of the drive to get us to this place where, we're basically viewed as being the bad guys to Mother Earth. You make Mother Earth, of course, a religion. And now, she's basically going to vomit us out, us Christians essentially, because, we're being such bad people. So, again, yes, be good to the planet. I think God wants us to be good stewards, but don't make it a religion. And I think Satan is working it in so that we'll have to pay, all these weird kind of taxes, and they'll, have all these places. Agenda 21 is all about getting people into these little tiny cities with these huge reserves with nobody's living on it, except the elites, of course. But that's a whole different talk. So, yeah, good question.
Yeah,
okay.
A question about the Millennium.
Yes.
You mentioned in the Millennium that there are no crimes and no problems and so forth. But yet, wouldn't the mortals be sinning? That's my question.
The mortals
mortals sin,
will have
so then wouldn't there be problems then?
The mortals will have the opportunity to rebel later. They will, as far as crime goes, it's not going to be like it is today. If there is any kind of indiscretion, it will be taken care of very, very quickly. First of all, Jesus will be the ultimate judge. Then each city will have a judge over it. These rulers, which probably hopefully be some of us, will be there ruling and reigning with Jesus. So we're going to be judges. These thrones are set in place. We'll be there judging along with him. So we'll be over our particular city, and if there is some kind of a disagreement, it'll be taken care of right away.
They do have the potential to sin since they're mortals, right?
They have the potential to sin.
Physical
but
body.
They have the potential to sin, but not the opportunity for it to get out of hand. And only after this 1,000 years where their hearts have been saying, boy, I bet you if I ruled myself, I could do a better job. I bet, if I were allowed to do what's right in my eyes, I'd do a great job. And I think Satan will be let out, and then he will go out and exacerbate that desire that they have, and then that is when they'll see him as a great liberator, not this scary guy, but he's oh yes, the Savior's come. He's going to help us free ourselves and to shake off the bonds of the great King. Yeah.
So some of the sensory communications that we experience today, does that have? We know it has some mind-altering aspects to it. Does it have some DNA-altering aspects to it as well?
The what kind of sensory?
Any sensory communication, vision, hearing, wherever they may come from.
I don't think it changes our, wherever they come from, where the senses. I don't think that changes our DNA. There is something called epigenetics, where your experience, let's say your father was an alcoholic, and then he had you, that could be something that could be imprinted on top of his genes and then passed on. That's a possibility. But I don't think the current research that I'm aware of, our DNA doesn't change. But that's kind of a tricky one. So I'm just not really sure. Otherwise.
We heard a lot today about Judah, the tribe of Judah. Where are a lot of these other tribes during all of this?
Well, when the northern tribe of Israel fell in 722, we're told in Kings that a number of them came down to Judah. So sure, a lot of them were wiped out, but there's still a remnant of each of the different tribes that have been mixed into Judah, right? So we use the blanket term Jews, right? I mean, I do. I don't have to feel like saying, well, the Israelites all the time, or the Hebrews. I mean, we can use those terms. It's probably better to say that, but I just use the blanket term, the Jews, to talk about everybody who's included in that tribe, in the tribes, the 12 tribes.
I had a quick question.
Yes.
Where did the 144,000 come in? Are they like part of the priest of the remnant in the...
Yeah, the 144,000, they're interesting. They obviously have an important role, but we're not really told what that role is. We're told that they're going to forever be with the Lord. They're going to have a special position with Him. They presumably are going to come back on horses as well. But we're not told what they're going to do. Some people have suggested that they will be evangelists of some sort. Of Tzadok? Yeah. Zadok or Tzadok, yeah. The righteous. I don't know. Show me the verse that says that. I would be curious to see what that says. I mean, they're men. They've never been with a woman. So, I don't know. To me, they're somewhat of an enigma. They could be, evangelists, but I'm not convinced that they have to be. I don't think the scripture actually says that. That's more of a speculation. Yeah. I just don't know. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to try to word this question appropriately because, having been around the Messianic movement for 20 years, we hear lots of different takes on things. And assuming I could never understand it or explain it as well as you can, what's the value of this versus a real basic Yeshua is my salvation? And that's the key.
Sure. Well, first of all, Jesus is coming back, so that's pretty significant. In Hebrews, it tells us to move beyond those elementary principles of the laying on of hands, the repentance of dead works, and baptisms. We're supposed to move beyond those things. The Lord wants us to discover all. I mean, I've asked the same question. I say, Lord, if just the gospel message is the only thing that matters, then why did you give us all this other stuff? Why did He give us all the other stuff? Because there's more. He wants us to see the full picture. I could say the same question. Why do you even come here? If the gospel is the only thing that matters, then why go through all this Jewish stuff? You're wasting your time, If you've put your trust in Jesus, then why waste the time with all the prayers and the songs and all that, right? Because God wants us to know that He has more. It's, it's like saying, well, why should I eat steak? Why not just have milk the rest of my life? I mean, right? I mean, you start with the milk. You start with that foundation of coming into the kingdom, but that's not where you're supposed to stay. You're not supposed to remain a baby. You know, if the baby didn't have milk, you can't just give the baby milk or the meat the first day. He has to grow, and then there's more. Goodness, my phone isn't.
I want to agree with you completely, and it's actually, I think, our craving for steak that opens us up to being, misled into other areas, because you've said it in your own presentation today.
Yeah.
There are places where people have gotten it wrong and gotten it right. And to me, it's not supposed to be that complicated. And I try to understand this stuff, and I do find it fascinating. I mean, I was a big Marvel Comics guy growing up, so, I get all the coolness about it. Yeah. But I don't know that I ever have the one true BS detector that allows me to know this is truth, this is not truth. And spending time on it often seems, a little bit of vanity of vanities, chasing after wind, pursuit of knowledge.
Well, that's assuming that that you're the only person that it matters to. Because there's a whole bunch of people in the New Age community, people that have had some kind of experience. They say, look, I've been abducted by aliens. What are you going to tell me as a representative of Jesus? How do you explain that? Right? You can say, well, don't worry about that stuff, right? That's just a bunch of nonsense. That person's not going to be too happy with your answer. He or she will go elsewhere and will find answers from somebody who can answer it in a reasonable fashion. So it is incumbent upon us to I'm not saying everybody has to know all this stuff, but at least to say, well, actually, yeah, that is real. Go look over here. Or this guy knows about it a little better than I do. And there is an answer to that. Because as much as we're all for the gospel, Satan is also doing his thing as well. And we're supposed to beware of our enemy. Be aware of our enemy who goes about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. So I think it is very important for us to understand what the enemy is up to. You don't have to be, have a PhD in this stuff, but at least have a basic grounding of what's going on. And if we don't understand the things that are happening nowadays, look, people are recording weird things happening in the sky like never before. I mean, really never before, because now we have cell phones, we've got YouTube, right? And you can have this stuff recorded and broadcast to the world in just minutes. And some of the stuff you're like, okay, it's fake. But it's been picked up by major news stations. It's been picked up by the governments of the world. I mean, China's reporting this. Mexico's reporting this. It seems like everybody but America is reporting this. Ronald Reagan, you saw what he said. You ever see anything like that? No. I mean, all these guys are saying, hey, there are aliens out there. And if we stick our head in the sand and say, oh, no, just the gospel, man, they're going to say, well, forget the church. What do they know? They don't know anything. They're just in la-la land, and we become irrelevant to the culture. So I think part of the question is sort of not looking so much at me, what's in it for me, but what's in it for the other guy, right? So I think that's part of what we need to look at.
Excellent response. Doug, we got 5 minutes and 3 more questions. I have the 3 questioners already, so here's number 1.
Okay.
Hi. I come from a Orthodox Jewish family, all 4 of my grandparents and both the parents. And one of the things that I've always struggled with is, why is there such a veil of understanding for Jews coming forward to see truth?
Yeah.
Because even after being married almost 20 years, there are times that I still struggle.
Yeah. Well, there's times I struggle too. I don't know the answer to that question.
I just think I'm crazy.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. I just don't know. So I wish. Does anybody know the answer to that question? I don't know. We'll figure that one out. So next question. Sorry.
Okay, we got 2 more.
Yeah.
You had your hand up, man.
You were saying that the babies drink milk and the men eat meat, or when we grow up we eat meat. Yeshua said, this is life eternal, that they know me,
yes,
the only true God, and Jesus Christ,
Okay.
whom you have sent. When we come here and we delve into things deeper, we are getting to know our Almighty Creator God.
Yeah.
And that was Jesus' orders, not just
Yeah.
a pie in the sky and the sweet by and by.
Yeah.
He wants us to know Him.
Yeah.
And that means study to show yourselves approved unto God.
Yes. And you know what's, I think is really important, if we kind of go with the whole sons of Seth, daughters of Cain kind of thing, and other topics, I think we open the door for a lot of people to become skeptical. Because there are people that are genuinely seeking answers. They want to know the truth. And we say, oh, that was, why did God destroy the world with the flood? Well, because people were just bonking each other over the head and all that stuff. They're like, gee, that's not a very nice God. So you tell me the God of the Hebrew Scriptures, of the Old Testament, is this big meanie, but now in the New Testament, He's this really lovey-dovey kind of God. They're like, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. And I think we've created some of our own skeptics because we haven't taken the time to give them reasonable and well-researched kind of answers. And as far as it being complicated, I'm trying to help you uncomplicate it. And I think it's the Augustinianism that has been thrown in there that has made everything very complicated. In one of my presentations, I talk about who are the elect. The elect are Israel. That's very simple. It has nothing to do with salvation. Once you see that, you're like, oh, well, I don't have to know the whole thing about tulip. I don't have to become an expert on debunking Calvinism. I just have to know that the word elect and election is talking about the Jews. That's all it means. It's nothing to do with salvation. Suddenly it's very simple. Okay, so just take it literally, but it takes me time to help take away the other stuff so that I can put in the good stuff. So, that's kind of what we're doing. I'm the dentist drilling out the old junk and easily putting in the new stuff. But it takes time, and sometimes it's painful when we've been told that the paradigm that we've had is wrong. Okay? I went through the same process. I'm like, what? The new heavens and earth come at the beginning? Come on, that's crazy. That's ridiculous. And I was like, but there it is. It's in all these places. What can I do with it? And so that's the process.
Let me just give a quick 10-second testimony on what you just said. I know a number of Christians who have rejected the Old Testament because there's that evil, angry God who ordered the Israelites to destroy all the Canaanite nations. That's not Jesus. Jesus wouldn't do that. You're teaching that they were destroyed because these were the Nephilim back in the land of Canaan. That's why they had to be destroyed. Answers those questions. So showing yourself approved is very practical applications right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Last question, Scott. You got the honor of the last question.
Thanks. Listen, I know Dr. Pentecost. And so just to add some clarity to what I'm thinking here, because my mind is about like the Death Star right now. The Antichrist I get, but with what you're saying, then the rise of who would be the false prophet and the image that is made in the likeness of the Antichrist.
Okay.
Your contention is that the Antichrist would be either somebody possessed by Satan or having some likeness of a hybrid.
He will be transformed from simple human to being
then he's going
hybrid.
to create a likeness of himself as well. And
then there will also be a likeness, which I think will just be some kind of biological form, but not spirit, body.
Half Antichrist, half goat, kind of.
Well, I think the Antichrist will be half Satan, half human.
Right.
And just like Jesus, right? Of course, he was 100% God, 100% human, but this is the ultimate counterfeit of the incarnation. And then the image is essentially Satan's stab at saying, look, God, you made somebody in your image. I can do the same thing. I can make somebody in my image. And I think it'll be some kind of avatar, robotish kind of thing. I don't think it'll be someone with an actual soul, but it will certainly trick a lot of people and look pretty cool.
Where's the false religion fall into all this?
Pardon?
Where does the false religion fall into all this?
All over, I guess. There's more to say, but we're out of time. So,
Doug, thank you very much. Let's give a hand to Doug.
Thank you.
Hamp.
Thank you.
For more information, visit us at www.etzheim.org. That's spelled EITZ-CHAIM.org. Or join us in Richardson, Texas for our weekly Shabbat services.